All right. 19th chapter, Masechah Shabbos. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer Omer. Rabbi Lezer says, Im loy hevi kli me'erev Shabbos, meviu b'Shabbos megula. Okay, so what is the context of the Mishnah here? The context of the Mishnah is Bris Milah. Remember, we saw at the end of the previous chapter, we saw the Chol Tzarkei Milah Osim b'Shabbos, that one could do anything you need to do in order to perform the Bris Milah on Shabbos. So what are the parameters of that? Does, anything go? So the very first Mishnah has a machlokas about this between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Kiva. That's why this parak, by the way, the 19th chapter of Masechah Shabbos is referred to as Rabbi Eliezer Milah. That's what that's what this chapter is referred to as, the title, because this is the chapter all about Bris Milah, coming off the heels of the previous chapter. Now, we know that the Mishnah is, of course, working with the premise that Bris Milah can be done on Shabbos. So is that any Bris Milah? What Bris Milah can be done on Shabbos? So here the Gemara clarifies this and says, well, it depends on the type of Bris Milah. If it's a Milah Bismana, if it's a Milah in its appropriate time, meaning on the 8th day, it can be done on Shabbos. However, if it is a Milah Shelo Bismana, let's say the Bris Milah is on the 9th day, or the 10th day, or the 14th day, or the 30th day, God forbid the baby is ill and it's unhealthy for the baby to have a Bris Milah on the 8th day, God forbid, so you have to push off the bris. And the Gemara talks about this in detail, the Mishnah later on talk about this, right? The Mishnah over here in the 5th Mishnah says, Kata nima l'shmona, l'tisha la'asara, la'achadasar, l'shneim asar, l'opachas v'lo you could have a bris milah on the 8th day, the 9th day, the 10th day, the 11th day, the 12th day, and these would all be assuming that the child is even healthy. If the child, God forbid, is not healthy, it's going to wait even longer. You have to wait an entire week after the point that the child is feeling well. But on Shabbos, it's only if it's an 8th day bris milah. Now, where do we know that from? So the Gemara says that, and the Gemara says it's in Yavamis and also in Shabbos over here, that we learn this from the way the Torah details the commandment of giving your child the bris milah. It says, Ubeyom hashmini yemol basar alaso, that on the 8th day, you give your child a bris milah, bayom afilu b'Shabbos. Bayom means on the 8th day, even if the 8th day is Shabbos and Yom Kippur put together, it doesn't matter, bris milah takes place on the 8th day. However, if it is not going to be the 8th day, so then you don't have the dispensation from the Torah, you don't have permission from the Torah to do the bris milah, and therefore the prohibition of drawing blood on Shabbos is going to take effect, and you would not be able to do the bris milah on Shabbos. You'd have to push it off. This is why it's so important that if someone gives birth on Friday afternoon, the timestamp is so critical as to when the child was born. Because if the child was born after Tzeitzah Kochavim, after the 3 stars came out, so then the bris milah is on Shabbos. A minute before that, though, you'd have to wait till Sunday to do the bris milah. Because just in case it's a suffix, it's unclear what day Friday late in the afternoon is. After civil twilight, is that still Friday or is it Shabbos? We treat that as Shabbos because it's a suffix de'oraisa. It's unclear whether or not there would be a de'oraisa of Shabbos here, and therefore we have to be machmir. But with regard to bris milah, we have to be machmir the other way, which is you can't do a bris milah too early, B, which is why you can't do it Friday, and B, it could be that the bris milah was supposed to be on Friday, and therefore you can't do it on Shabbos because that would be a milah not in its appropriate time, and therefore you have to wait till Sunday. This is where the Mishnah is predicated. Now the Mishnah picks up and has a machlokas as to what one can do in order to perform the bris milah. Rabbi Lezer says in Lahevi Kli Me'erev Shabbos. Now, one of the most critical points of the pieces of a bris is the baby, of course, obviously. The father, the moel, and assuming the father is not a moel, and of course the knife. Well, how are you going to do a bris milah without a knife? So let's say the knife was not brought to the baby before Shabbos, assuming that there's no Eruv and you can't carry the knife. So Maviu b'Shabbos Megula says, Rabbi Lazar, you can bring the knife openly on Shabbos, carry it in the streets, no problems. Ubisakana, mechaseo al pi edim, if it's there's a concern of anti-Semitism, so you could hide the knife and have two edim, two witnesses witness that. The Gemara discusses why you need to have two witnesses witness it, not for right now. Then continues the Mishnah, says, "Va'odam Rebbe Lazar." Rebbe Lazar continues and he says, "Korsin eitzim lasos pechamim lasos kli barzel." You could chop down trees in order to make coal. In order to, meaning to make fire, in order to make coal, in order to even weld out the knife, one could do that on Shabbos in order to perform Bris Milah. Wow, you can do all of this, all of the machshirei Milah, all of the preparatory things you need to do in order to perform Bris Milah, all of those things can be done on Shabbos. However, Rabbi Kiva argues, Kollel and Rabbi Kiva says, hold on, we don't take it that far. Kol malacha she'efshar la'asos erev Shabbos. It depends on whether or not you were able to do it before Shabbos. If you're able to do it before Shabbos, sorry, eino doches a Shabbos. It's not going to push off Shabbos. For example, you didn't have a knife prepared beforehand. Too bad. You could have done it, but you didn't. You could have had the knife in the place it's supposed to be, but you didn't. And therefore, eino doches a Shabbos. Not going to push off Shabbos. She'iev shala asos erev Shabbos. The things you were unable to do before Shabbos. For example, the Bris Milah itself. Can't do that early. You have to do that on Shabbos. So therefore, doches a Shabbos, it pushes off Shabbos. Okay. Now remember, the last Mishnah we saw said, Kol tzarki Milah osim b'Shabbos. You do anything necessary for the Bris Milah on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah here, osim kol tzarki Milah. You do everything b'Shabbos. Molin, you do the Milah. Priya, which is the outer membrane, the inner membrane around the foreskin. You do priya, you separate that outer membrane. That is a halach Moshe Messinai that we received from Moshe Rabbeinu to do priya. Now, Yehoshua instituted it later, but this was all a Masorah from Har Sinai. Motetin, you do metzitza. Metzitza is drawing the blood. It was thought medically that it is critical for the baby that after the bris is performed, you have to make sure that there's blood flow. So what the doctors did is that they would suck out the blood. We still do that today. It's become part of the ceremony of a bris milah. We use a vessel in order to suck out the blood. V'nonen alea pamalius v'kamon. You put all the medications necessary, all the bandages, all the medications, and that's what the Mishnah continues, and it says you have to have the water available for the baby. This is to marchitz and asakata. You bathe the child. Bein lifnei amila, bein la'achar amila. You do it before the bris, after the bris. Basically, all the things that you couldn't do before Shabbos, you have to do. You have to do on Shabbos. Anything that's for the health of the baby and for, of course, the bris milah, for the bris milah itself. Okay. I want to discuss this, and by the way, the laws of bris milah, by and large, about 80% of all the laws of bris milah, all are found in this chapter. Over here in this Mishnah, the last Mishnah, it actually discusses what the bris milah has to look like. Over here we saw the different parts of a bris milah, milah, priya, and metzitza. All of the laws of bris milah are discussed, not 80% of them are discussed in the 19th chapter. The rest of the laws are discussed also in Parak Ha'arel of Yevamos, the 8th chapter of Maseches Yevamos. You have some of the laws of bris milah there. You have a little bit in Psachim. Anyway, so these are where the laws of bris milah are. Now, the Gemara picks up after this Mishnah, where we learned to the Mishnah that you do, all of these things that, osin kol tzarki milah b'Shabbos, you do anything necessary for the Bris Milah on Shabbos, all of the different pieces of it. So here we come to the Gemara over here. Says the Gemara, Michti. Now let's think about this, says the Gemara. Katani Kulhu, the Mishnah taught, remember the Mishnah went through all of the different stages of Bris Milah. Milah, Priya, Mitzitza. If that's the case, so then why does the Mishnah then say, Osin Kol Tzarki Milah? You do everything necessary for the Bris Milah. What do you mean? What else is left? The Mishnah listed everything. So what else is left? Obviously, right? Obviously, you do everything if the Mishnah is listing all the things that you do. So what is this coming to teach me? Kol Tzarki Milah La'asuyei Mai. What is all the needs of the circumcision of the Bris Milah? What is that coming to include? Says the Gemara, La'asuyei Hadad Rabbanan. It's coming to include the following that the rabbis taught. Hamo, the mohel. Kol Zman Shu Osek B'Milah. Whenever he is involved in doing the circumcision, Choser, he can return to Bein al Tzitzin HaMa'akvin Es HaMilah Bein al Tzitzin Shein Ma'akvin Es HaMilah. Now, the Mishnah later discusses exactly, how much foreskin needs to be removed. What needs to, you need to be able to show the atara, the crown of the organ. So the Mishnah and the Gemara outline exactly what the Bris Milah is supposed to look like. Now, it could be that the Moel does a, pardon my pun, Jack, does a hack job, does a choppy job. Okay, so when he slices, when he makes his slice, when he makes his incision, it could be his hand slips a little bit, and whatever it might be, he didn't have the shield placed properly, whatever it is. So it could be he did not remove enough foreskin. Obviously, if he didn't remove enough, he needs to go back and fix it, right? The child would still be considered an arel, which means that they are uncircumcised, okay, if you don't remove everything. But there's another type, which is also not a perfect Bris Milah, but one where you removed everything that's necessary, but it doesn't look great, okay? So the Gemara over here says that one is able to go back and fix the parts that, would help make the Bris Milah look more normal, even if you removed all the necessary pieces of the foreskin. But that is only, says the Gemara, if the Moel is still actively doing the Bris Milah. Once the Mohel has completed the Bris, says the Gemara, Pirish, once he's withdrawn and he's completed the Bris, then Al Tzitzan HaMa'akvin Es HaMilah, obviously if there are shreds of the arla, of the foreskin that are going to force us to treat it as if the child was never circumcised, obviously you need to go back and fix it. However, however, on the other parts of the arla that are not absolutely necessary to remove, it just looks better if they are removed. So once the mole is done, Eino Choser, you can't go back. End of Gemara. This is why the Mishnah taught Kol Tzarki Milah. That is what the Kol Tzarki Milah is coming to include. This whole discussion about Tzitzan HaMa'akvin Es HaMilah, going back to those extra pieces versus the pieces that are necessary to move, not necessary to move, depending on whether or not the mole is still actively involved in the Bris Milah. Okay.
So I have a question. You're talking about Shabbat now, right?
Oh, so Jack, we might as well call you Rashi. Rashi says, what are we talking about right now? We're talking about Shabbos. Of course, we're talking about Shabbos. That's what Rashi says. Hamol, when is the Milah taking place? B'Shabbos, Rashi. One word. It's a one-word Rashi. This one word, Rashi, is the...
Is this according to Rabbi Akiva, who says you...
Yes, of course.
Do those things necessary?
Yes. This is even according to Rabbi Akiva. Very good, Charlie. This is even according to Rabbi Akiva. Of course, Rabbi Lazar would say, right? Of course, Rabbi Lazar would say this is okay. But even Rabbi Akiva, meaning he couldn't do this before Shabbos, right? These are the things that you have to do on Shabbos. So Rashi says, like Charlie and Jack, that, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about on Shabbos. The Chiddush of our Mishnah, the great novel idea that comes out of our Mishnah is that even on Shabbos, if the Moel is still doing the Bris Milah, and there are pieces of the Arla, even those pieces that are not necessary to remove, the Moel, while he's still doing the Bris, can go and remove the pieces of foreskin, even on Shabbos. This is Rashi's way of understanding this Gemara. Now, the Rambam, though, has a different understanding of our Gemara. Says the Rambam the following: Yesh tzitzin hama'akvin es hamila, v'yesh tzitzin she'ein ma'akvin es hamila. There are strands of foreskin that prevent the mitzvah of bris milah from being performed, and parts that are not necessary to remove. Next, where then he describes the anatomy. Next, Rambam. Halacha Dalet. Hamol, the mohel, quoting our brisa, Kozman she'osek b'milah, whenever he's involved in the milah, chozer bein al hatzitzin shema'akvin, he can go back and remove the tzitzin that are me'akvin, that will prevent the mitzvah from being performed, being fulfilled, I should say. Bein al tzitzin she'ein ma'akvin, and he can even go back on the parts that are not necessary to remove, as long as he's still doing the bris milah. Piresh, however, once he has removed himself from the bris, meaning the baby is already wrapped up, baby is in the room, being taken care of now by the mother, recovering, the mole comes to check on the baby and says, oh my goodness gracious, look, it's such a choppy job. It's a kosher bris, certainly a kosher bris, but it's a choppy job. Would you like me to fix it? So, says the Rambam, he can only go and fix it if it's necessary in order to perform the mitzvah, in order to fulfill the mitzvah. However, if it's just the strands that it doesn't look great, but the mitzvah has been fulfilled, Eino Choser. The Moel, we would tell them all, no, you can't go back and fix it. You've already stopped. Baby's already out. Milah's done. Too bad you messed up. Rambam over here. This Rambam is not in Hilchos Shabbos. This Rambam is in Hilchos Milah, the laws of Bris Milah. The Rambam nowhere here puts this situation in the context of Shabbos. The Rambam is talking about on a regular Wednesday morning bris. If the Moel has finished the bris, you can't go back and fix it up, unless, of course, it's necessary in order for the mitzvah to be fulfilled. What is this machlokes between Rashi and the Rambam all about? Again, Rashi holds that if it isn't Shabbos, if it's a Wednesday morning, of course you can go back and fix the bris. Of course you can go back and fix the milah. Right? Not only for the parts that are necessary to fix, even the unnecessary parts, just to make it a little bit, cleaner. Rashi says, of course you can go back, even on a Wednesday morning. Rambam, nope, can't go back. So what is this machlokes all about? Comes along the Beis Halevi, Rabbi Yosha Ber Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik, the Rav of Tzlutsk. He was the second to Rosh Yeshiva of the Nitziv in Volozhin until he left the yeshiva and went to go be the Rav of Tzlutsk. Later, his son, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, married the granddaughter of the Nitziv. In fact, the shidduch was made in a shiva house. I forgot who was sitting shiva, if it was the Beis Halevi or the Nitziv who was sitting shiva. I think the Nitziv was sitting shiva, and the Beis Halevi presented to the Nitziv this shidduch of his granddaughter marrying his son. Reb Chaim ended up marrying the daughter of the Nitziv, and Reb Chaim ended up becoming the Malamakom. He ended up filling that spot of his father in Volozhin, of becoming the second Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. And the Nitziv and Reb Chaim really were the ones that took Volozhin and made it something that we're still basking in the glow of today. Says the Beis Halevi the following in his responsa. He says the machlokas between the Rambam and Rashi gets to the heart and soul of how you define the mitzvah of Bris Milah. Is the mitzvah of Bris Milah to perform a Bris Milah, the act of removing an arla, or is the mitzvah of Bris Milah lihiyos mahol, to be in a state of circumcised? Is it to go through the circumcision? Is it the verb, or is it the noun of being circumcised? This is the machlokes in Rambam and Rashi. According, says the Beis Halevi the following. According to the Rambam, the mitzvah is to be mahol. Once the Bris Milah, the mitzvah is, according to the Rambam, the mitzvah is to be mahol. Let me just check my notes 1 second. I'm sorry, I said it the opposite way. According to the Rambam, the mitzvah is to the verb of the action of performing a Bris Milah. Performing a Bris Milah. Once that mitzvah is fulfilled, yes, of course, once that mitzvah is fulfilled, so then it's done. You've done the action. You've performed the Bris Milah. According to Rashi, no. The mitzvah is to be in a state of circumcised. Once you have done the action, you are still, quote unquote, fulfilling a mitzvah whenever you are in that state of circumcision. Okay? Whenever you are circumcised. So therefore, says the Beis Halevi like this. According to the Rambam, one cannot go back and fix up their choppy job on the Bris Milah. Why? Once they're already done, even on a Wednesday. Why? Because the mitzvah is complete already. It's done. It's behind you. There's no such thing as having hid or a mitzvah, beautifying a mitzvah. Once the mitzvah is complete, it's done. Right? There's no such thing. Once Sukkot is over, is there such thing as fulfilling hid or mitzvah of getting an even more beautiful esrog the day after Sukkot? Of course not. The mitzvah is done. You can't give hid or mitzvah once the mitzvah is complete. Once the mole has stopped doing the Bris Milah, that's it. You've lost your opportunity. The mitzvah is done. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to go back and beautify the mitzvah, because there is no more mitzvah you're going to be beautifying. You have fulfilled the mitzvah. The mitzvah is completed. It's done. Final step was completing the bris. That's it. However, according to Rashi, on a regular Wednesday, you could go back and fix it. Why? Because the mitzvah is not to do a circumcision, it's to be circumcised. And therefore, even 20 years later, there's still a mitzvah to continue to fulfill. You're continuing to fulfill the mitzvah. And therefore, if you can make it a more hiddur mitzvah, a more beautified version of the mitzvah, even later on, you have the responsibility to do that. On Shabbos, hiddur mitzvah does not push aside Shabbos, which is why on Shabbos, Rashi said, you're not allowed to fix it up. Because at that point, it would be you're unable to, because it's Shabbos, and you can't beautify a mitzvah on Shabbos if it's going to violate Shabbos. You do the mitzvah itself, okay. However, go back 2 days later, 3 days later, after Shabbos, sure, you can go back and fix it, according to Rashi. Because there's still hitter mitzvah, there's still the opportunity to beautify the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is to be circumcised, according to Rashi. The Rambam, it's to perform a circumcision. Rashi, it's to be circumcised. We find, and by the way, the Tur also says like Rashi. The Tur also says like Rashi over here. This is the way it's quoted in the Tur. We find this, by the way, Rav Yosef Engel, Rav Yosef Engel says that we see this come afore in another machlokas between the Rambam and other Rishonim, like the Tur, the Ravid, where the Rambam discusses when one receives punishment for not receiving a bris milah. At what point does the punishment for not receiving a bris milah kick in? Says the Rambam the following: Mitzvahs milah, mitzvahs aseh, shechayev and aleha kares. That bris milah is a mitzvahs aseh. It is a positive commandment that one would receive kares, would receive this horrific punishment of kares for, we can't get into the details of exactly what kares is, how it works, but it is the worst punishment one can receive in Shamayim, that one does not, the worst punishment that one would not receive in this world, that you receive in the next world, is kares. So says the Rambam that bris milah is a positive commandment that one, if one did not fulfill, you would get kares for. And I just want to clarify, explain what that means for a minute. So, generally speaking, punishments are only given to negative commandments, right? Transgressions. I actively transgress Shabbos, for example, so therefore I receive punishment for such a thing. I actively eat non-kosher, I receive lashes. I receive punishment for violating Torah law. Not fulfilling a positive commandment is not actively violating Torah law. It's passively violating Torah law. I am not taking the opportunity to actively fulfill a mitzvah. That's being passive. We don't give punishment for not fulfilling positive commandments, with the exception of two mitzvah. Number one, bris milah, kares, for not fulfilling a positive commandment. Number two, karban pesach, by not eating the karban pesach. Okay? Says the Rambam, Milah mitzvahs esei shechayvan aleh kares. Milah is a positive commandment that you receive kares for. Shnei amar, as the pasuk says, the aral zachar asher lo yimol, that if you do not circumcise an uncircumcised male, as basar lasso, from his, removing his foreskin, that the soul of this person is nichrasa, would receive punishment, receive this terrible punishment of kares. Umitzvah al ha'av lamolis beno, there's a positive commandment for the father to circumcise the child. By the way, that's an interesting machlokas between the Or Zarua and the Marach Or Zarua. The Or Zarua and the Marach Or Zarua are a father-son team of later Rishonim, late 14th century. Or Zarua and Marach Or Zarua have a machlokas about whether or not a father who knows how to perform a bris milah, a father who's a moel, is allowed to pass it up to a shliach. If they know how to do it and they're comfortable doing it, but for whatever reason they want to have a mohel do it, according to the Or Zarua, the father, one is allowed to pass it along. According to the Maharach Or Zarua, if the father knows how to do it, they are not allowed to pass it along. Says the Rambam further, V'al harav lamolis avdo, the master is obligated to circumcise their servant. Yilit bais u'mignas kesef. Okay. Says the Rambam further, Avar ha'avo la'adon v'lo malosan bitulin essay. Let's say the father or the master does not circumcise the one they're supposed to circumcise, either the child or the servant. They have not fulfilled a pasuk commandment. However, ve'eno chayv kares, you will not receive kares. Kares is only upon the person who does not make sure that they become circumcised. Let's say a person, God forbid, their father did not give them a circumcision, did not arrange for a circumcision to happen. They grow up and they don't go through with getting a circumcision, so then that is when kares is going to be incurred. She'ein hakares taloi ela ba'arel atzmo. It is on the uncircumcised person who would receive kares. Ubesin mitzuvim lamul oso. Then, if the father doesn't do it, the obligation falls on Bezdin. Bismano velo yanichu Arab Yisrael velo ba'avdehen. We are not supposed to leave anyone amongst the Jewish people with an aro, with a foreskin. We need to make sure that everyone does it. By the way, the Gemara in our chapter, in the 19th chapter, discusses how Bris Milah, because it was such a beloved mitzvah from its inception, and something that we have always made sure to take the risk in fulfilling despite all the challenges. It is a mitzvah that has been held onto the Jewish people throughout the generations, and it's an unbelievable thing. Even the most secular Jews, it is so rare that someone will not have a bris milah. It happens. Now, of course, it happens, but even assimilated Jews, so many Jews receive bris milah as opposed to, let's say, tefillin. Of course, we know that's not the case, right? Shabbos, kashrut, so many other mitzvos just fall by the wayside. Bris milah, though, it's Baruch Hashem, Bli Ayin Hara. Bris milah has been held onto through the generations. Continues the Rambam. Next halacha. Ein malin beno shel adam ella shalom midato. That a person should not circumcise someone else's son without their foreknowledge. Ella imkain avar v'nimne lamul. However, unless the father is being lazy and is not doing the bris milah, so then shebezdin malan also v'alkarchov, the beis din goes and circumcises the child against the father's will. Okay, fine. Says the Rambam, kishiyigadel hu, when the child grows up, chayav lamol asatzmo, he has to circumcise himself. V'chol yom v'yom shi'avur alav mishiyagdil. Once the child turns 13 years old, every day that passes, that the bris milah is not performed, and he does not remove the foreskin from his body, they violate a positive commandment. However, the kares punishment, that horrific kares punishment, is only going to kick in, says the Rambam, only if the child, only once the person passes away and they never receive the bris milah, that is when you would be punished with kares. Essentially, what's the Rambam saying? That the kares is only going to kick in once the bris milah becomes an impossibility. Once the bris milah becomes an impossibility, that's when the punishment is going to kick in. Says the Ravid. The Ravid, in his comments on the Rambam, he says, "Ein bazeh tavlin." This does not make any sense. There's no flavor here. There's no spice here. It makes no sense. This is flavorless, says the Ravid. V'chi mishum hasra savek. Poter doso min hashamayim. V'chol yom, says the Ravid, omed be'isser kares. Every single day after the child's 13 years old, every single day, the child is not going to bris milah. The person, the adult, does not get a bris milah. They receive kares. So if a person waits until he is 13 years old and 2 days to get a bris milah, he received 1 kares, even though he got his bris milah at 13 years and 2 days. If he waited 13 years and 3 days, he has 2 kareses on his head. If he waits an entire year until his 14th birthday, he has 365 kareses on his head. If he waits until he is 20 years old, oh my gosh, how many kareses he has on his head? A person can go their whole life, God forbid, 1,000,000 times a person goes their whole life without getting a bris milah. They go 100 years. They die at the age of 113 years old without having get a bris milah. Such a person receives 36,500 different punishments of kares in their lifetime. Can you imagine such a horrific situation? But this is the opinion of the Reich. Rambam says impossible. Only 1 kares for not receiving a bris milah. Ravid says you can have a kares every single day of your life that goes by that you don't get the bris milah, and they'll just keep adding up. Or keep adding up. The Tur quotes the Rabbi. The Tur quotes the Rabbi on the left side. He holds like the Rabbi. The Beis Yosef tries to defend the Rambam, and he says it's hard to say that you receive a kares every single day because it says the Beis Yosef. He says that here it's you're over el b'sheva al taseh. You're passive, and you're able to fix it, right? It's very hard to say that a mitzvah you're able to actually fix, meaning by receiving your bris milah, and you're being passive, that you're going to be chayav kares ad sheyamos, that you're going to be chayav kares every single day. You can have one kares your entire life. However, according to the Beis Yosef, this makes a lot of sense, because the Rambam fits in line with his opinion. According to the Rambam, what's the mitzvah of bris milah? It's the act of circumcision. Once the act of circumcision happens, okay, you fulfilled the mitzvah. That's it. So by definition, the only punishment can be when the act is impossible to fulfill, which only happens once the person dies. Therefore, one kares. However, according to the Tur, who also agreed with Rashi before, that according to the Tur, the mitzvah of bris milah is the noun of being a circumcised person. Every single day, you are not fulfilling that mitzvah. Therefore, every single day that goes by, you're going to get another kares. So you see, the Rambam's in line with his own opinion, the Tur's in line with his own opinion. As Gishma, you see from here this fundamental machlokas between the Rambam on the one hand and the Tur on the other side as to how you define bris milah. Is bris milah defined by being circumcised like the Tur, and therefore you're going to receive a kares every single day like the Reich said, and you are able to fix up the bris milah at a later date to increase the hidur mitzvah, because the mitzvah is to be circumcised. It's the noun of being a circumcised person, versus the Rambam, who says no, the mitzvah is to do the action of circumcision, which is why you once the milah is done, you can't go back and fix it anymore. That's it. It's over, because it's a one-time mitzvah. It's a one-time mitzvah. And that's also why you're not going to receive kares except for just that one time, by not fulfilling that last opportunity of not getting the bris milah, the last day of your life. Okay, we'll stop here for now. This is the 19th chapter of Masechah Shabbos. There's a lot more, obviously, to say on the 19th chapter, but God willing, next week we will continue with the 20th chapter. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna miss Shabbos when it's over. We only got 5 more weeks of Shabbos. That's it. I'm gonna miss it. All right, we'll stop here.